Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another edition of Hello Pastor with Reverend Dr. Chandler G. Freeman. My name is Dennis Jar, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. For the past 2 or 3 weeks, you have seen and heard reports of death as a result of drug overdose in Liberia, substance abuse, drug abuse, and everything in between has been reported repeatedly in Liberia. And then we have a population in the country that people refer to as the Zogos. These are people that are drug addicts and mainly youth who live in ghettos, some even in the graveyard. Some sleep in the tombs with dead bodies. We have seen videos, footages of people, of kids walking like zombies under the influence of drugs. Very, very sad. So today we've decided to talk about substance abuse and the Zogo crisis in Liberia because this topic is very important. So Hello Pastor, which comes to you every other Sunday, decided to talk about this. I'm happy to welcome Reverend Dr. Chandler Freeman, who is not just a pastor, but also a licensed professional counselor. Very much, he has the credential to talk about this. Reverend, welcome to the show.
Brother Dennis, good evening. I'd like to thank you for another opportunity for us to be able to address such an important topic, the topic of drug abuse in Liberia and the Zogo crisis. Definitely, I'm excited to be here today to be able to contribute to such a meaningful conversation.
Thank you so much. I want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. This is Hello Pastor on Focus on Liberia. And talking about the drug abuse, Reverend, there's a lot of things that I've been hearing. First of all, and I will go through the whole thing, but here are my thoughts, right? First of all, is like, what is this drug abuse? What causes? Is this a spiritual problem? Because is it demons that are causing this? What is it? What really is causing this thing? And what has been the impact? If this issue is not addressed, what's going to happen to the country going forward? What do we do? And so been pondering this, and we've seen the report. So even before we start, I'm going to show you a little clip from Liberia, where this child believed to be under the influence of drugs. Let's take a look. Pastor Freeman, I don't know what he took, but people who are there and from the rest of the video, he's taking in some substance that is making him like that. And let me also say that yesterday I got a text message from my cousin say our cousin's son, which is the second cousin, died yesterday morning from an overdose of something they call Kush, Kusa, something like that. And he died in the morning and was buried the same day by 5 p.m. So this is a serious problem, and it has hit home to my family. So what we are going to discuss tonight is not something that is abstract. It's something that is happening, that is affecting lives, that is affecting families, and what can we do? Does God even care? Let me start by saying, my first question is, on overall, what you make of this topic, drug abuse and the Zogo crisis.
Well, Brother Dennis, I think in order to really get into this topic, I really wanted to start with a definition of some of the terms.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like if I start by giving you an understanding of the terms that we are discussing, I think if we do that, then the individual will be able to follow the topic kind of in a better way. So let me just start first by talking about the initial conversation has to do with what is drug abuse.
Yeah.
So basically, when we talk about drug abuse, we talk about individuals who are addicted, Brother Dennis, to many substances. And there's so many substances. For example, when we talk about drug abuse, we talk about, stimulant abuse. So, and then, from my research, I've heard that the drug that is used in Liberia is cocaine and another substance called cocaine. And then, you have Adderall, you have meth, you have opium, you have heroin, you have prescription painkillers, you have sedatives, you have Xanax, you have Ativan, and you have Valium. And so when we talk about drug abuse, this is what we're saying. We're saying that the individuals now are addicted to the substances that they are taking. And so, and that's the reason, and ultimately, because drugs has consequences, and one of the consequences is death, overdose. It's a real consequence when individuals abuse drug. Overdose is a real consequence. All right, now the individuals that are doing it, there is a name, Brother Dennis, that the people have ascribed to them in Liberia, and the name is Zogo. So I want to start first by telling you who is a Zogo. Now, a Zogo, when the term is used, a Zogo is a derogatory term. It's important for you to understand it's a derogatory term. It's a label for one who is criminal, or it's a label for youth living on the streets. Now, a Zogo can be a male, or a Zogo, Brother Dennis, can be a female. Even though a lot a larger percentage of Zogos happen to be male, but it's important for you to understand you have Zogos who are men and you have Zogos who are women. Now, let me begin to give you some understanding of this term Zogo.
Right.
Now, one, a Zogo is a disadvantaged youth. A Zogo is a disadvantaged youth. Number two, a Zogo is a vulnerable youth who lack basic social amenities. Thirdly, a Zogo is a drug addicted youth or a drug user. Now, a Zogo can also be a former child soldier or ex-combatant. It's not always the case. But a part of the Zogo population happen to be individuals who were child soldiers or who were ex-combatant, but not all the cases, all right? Now, when we talk about, child soldiers, who are we talking about? We're talking about individuals, who were recruited. They participated in monstrous acts of violence from 1989 to 2003. And when these individuals, these young people were recruited, some of them were even under the age of 10 years old. When we talk about who is a Zogo, we're talking about some of the youth who wash cars in Liberia to live or as a hustle or to make money. You're talking about also, when I talk about a Zogo, I might move, Brother Dennis, from positive to negative, because when I talk about, the youth in Liberia who on the street hustling and trying to wash your car, if you come from an office, they will say, let me wash your car. That's part of Zogo hustle. But that's positive. But then we also have on a negative, you have Zogos who are involved in hijacking, armed robberies, youth that terrorize or beg on the streets. You're talking about youth who are also who drug sellers or the sellers of stolen items. They steal items from individuals and then they sell it on the streets. Youth who are living on the streets, they're sleeping on market tables, they're sleeping in graveyards, they're sleeping in cemeteries, in abandoned shelters, abandoned buildings. When we talk about the term Zogo, we're talking about a talk, you're talking about an addict, a person who uses drug to numb. The picture that we saw is a youth who has used mind-bending drugs. Mind-bending drugs. Now, one of the reasons they used the drugs, when they started using the drugs, it was to numb the pain. It was a way of escaping hardship, the situation that they were going through. However, they became addicted to the drugs. Zogos are thieves, Zogos are prostitutes, Zogos are homeless youth, violent youth, living in a subhuman way. You're talking about youth. But another thing, Brother Dennis, is that when individuals use drugs over a period of time, it's not the individual, not just addicted to drugs, it can also lead to mental illnesses. However, if the individual was a child soldier, the individual already dealing with mental health issues. For example, we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. That's very common among child soldiers, nightmares, flashback, and everything. We call it PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and everything. You talk about shock after threatening events, trouble concentrating, reliving the trauma, nightmare, flashback, suicidal thoughts, and everything. So when we talk about Zogo, these in a nutshell vulnerable youth who are affected by all the things that are discussed, not just addiction, but youth who are also dealing with mental illnesses and having been treated and everything. So when we talk about Zogo, I just wanted to give you an idea of what the term means and everything. I will turn back to you now, Brother Dennis, having explained drug abuse and who a Zogo is.
we had a little bit of power outage, so you can just continue the show using your outline because then it had a power outage.
Okay, then let me just continue then. All right, so having given you a definition of who a Zogo is, I will move into quickly biblical descriptions. Now, when I talk about a Zogo, it's important for you to understand that you're talking about young people who live on market, who sleep on market tables, who sleep in cemeteries, abandoned shelters, and buildings. Well, there are Zogos. There was a Zogo in the Bible. In Mark, there's this man who was living in the graveyard, literally the same situation we have happening back home. So it's important for us to understand how that fits the biblical description. Uh, but when we look at the Mark passage, uh, he had no clothes. He lived like a subhuman. This man lived like a wild animal. That's Luke chapter 8, verse 27. Let me give you some background. So, number one, Luke chapter 8, verse 27, the Zogo in the Bible. He wore no clothes. He lived like a subhuman. He lived like a wild animal and everything. And he lived among the tomb of the dead. Isn't it interesting that the individual is not dead yet, but the individual is living among the dead? All right. Also, the people, he was out of control because when people tried to chain him, he always broke the chain and everything. So that's the definition of a so-called an individual who is really, really out of control. But this man was being tormented. When we talk about Zogoism, we're talking about self-destructive behavior, an individual who is self-destructive in their behavior. And the man had uncontrollable behavior, and nobody could tame him. But what's fascinating is that it's fascinating in the text that the Bible points to the fact that we had spiritual forces that were affecting him. Now, when the text is used, the text said that when the man begins to speak, they ask him to identify himself. The man says legion. Legion is a term for 6,000 demons, the spiritual forces that were affecting the man. Even though you're dealing with something medical, but you cannot rule out the spiritual connotations when we begin to talk about these kind of cases. So is the situation medical? Yes. Is the situation clinical? Yes, but at the same time, are there spiritual factors that we have to take into consideration? Yes, we cannot talk about the medical and ignore the spiritual connotation. Now, when we begin to deal with this, we have to understand that the spirit never wanted for this man to be set free. And this man had been in this situation for a while. And so it's important for us to understand that even the social economic situations that keep individuals in these kind of situations are going to fight back because for the drug dealer, Zogo is a customer. The Zogo might take $10 US and buy drug from a drug dealer. Is that drug dealer willing for that Zogo to stop coming to him every day? Because the drug dealer is making a living from the Zogo buying drugs from him every day. And so it's important for us to understand the forces that you're dealing with. You're dealing with the underground drug industry. Underground drug industry. That the Zogo is a customer. And these are factors that we really have you have to take into consideration, why is this going on? There are spiritual factors, but then there are social economic factors that we have to take into consideration. Now, this is the question. The first thing I want you to know is that in terms of hope, is there hope in this kind of situation? Yes. There's always hope. I want you to understand that, yes, there are treatments. There are treatments for individuals who find themselves dependent on chemical dependency or having side issues. Yes, there are ways that they can be treated. For example, we can treat them in two ways. And the two ways you can treat individuals in this kind of situation. We can treat them with different therapies. There are different therapies, but we can also treat them with medications. But when I'm talking about therapy, I'm talking about one-on-one therapy or group therapy. That's how we can break it down. We can treat them in a group, where we treat them with other individuals who find themselves in similar situation, or we can do one-on-one when it comes to therapy with individuals who find themselves in this situation. Okay, let me talk about some of the therapies we got. Cognitive. Let me just give you an idea of therapies that we can use to help individuals in this situation in terms of what can be done. Can something be done? Yes, I want you to know that something can be done. We can treat them with therapy and we can treat them with medication. There's cognitive processing therapy. There's prolonged exposure therapy. There's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. There's stress inoculation training. And then we also have medication that you can use in terms of the healing process. So you can treat with therapy or you can treat with medication. There's some medications. Let me just give you some common medications that have been used to help individuals who had abused substances, from Paxil to Zoloft to Prozac. Now, but when I say that, it's important for you to understand that these medications also have side effects. And also, it's important that the individuals, when they move from using drugs to getting on psych medication, that the individuals do get addicted to the psych medication. There's something called cognitive behavior therapy, and that is where we can use one-on-one therapy. But it's important that the individuals make lifestyle choices. Lifestyle choices are important. We're talking about lifestyle talking. We're talking about also the individuals getting, some new life skills that can help them to cut down and can help them to stop the addiction they find themselves in. And then we also have the 12-step process. Let me talk about that a little bit. If you don't know about, if you never heard anything about the 12-step process, what can an individual do if the individual has been affected by drugs? When I talk about this, my approach to treatment here is an integrated approach, but however, I like to always start with the individual. It's important that we start with the person. Does this person want to be healed? It's important for us to start with the person. Now, that person has to do something. Now, what are the things that individual has to do? Number one, when an individual is addicted to drugs, the individual has to admit, number one, you have to admit you're not in control of your addiction. Number one, you have to admit you're not in control of your addiction. And you have to recognize what we call a higher power, or the recognition God is the most high and God is the highest power that will ever be. Now, why is this important? It's important because the individual can recognize that God can give them the strength to be able to overcome the addiction. So number one, the individual has to admit you're not in control of your addiction. You can recognize that a higher power can give you strength. Then how about examining past mistakes, making amends, living a new way of life? Now, what are the 12 steps? What are the 12 steps that this individual has to take on the road to recovery, on the road to sobriety and everything? Number one, let's talk about the 12 steps of recovery. So number one, you have to admit your life has become unmanageable. Number one, in order for you to be delivered, in order you to get free from addiction, in order for you to be able to stop addiction, number one, you have to admit my life is out of control. My life is unmanageable. Step number one. And when we talk about the steps, you can't run through the steps. You can't jump over steps. You have to go through the steps in a systematic way. Step one, step two, step three, until we get to the 12th step. Step number one, that individual, that Zogo, has to sit down by themselves and realize my life is out of control. My life is a living hell. I don't have control right now. That's step number one. But there's hope, except that you need God to become sober. You have to accept step number two. You have to accept God, that God can help you to become sober. Then number three, you have to make a decision. This is one of the biggest decisions you can ever make. Step number three, you have to decide to turn your life over to God. You can't do this by yourself. And you know, the Philippian passage is very encouraging. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But you have to, number one, you have to admit your life is out of control. Number two, you have to accept that you need God to become sober. You can't do this alone. You can't do this without the help of God. Addiction is so real. Even going through the withdrawal is so real that you need the help of the living God. You have to decide to turn over your life to God, but then you have to honestly take stock of your life. And that's the reason why sometimes it's very good for the individual to be able to go to rehab. Because if the individual is in the ghetto trying to go through the steps, sometimes it can be difficult because the individual is in an environment where the individual can become easily distracted. But to take stock of your life, you need to be in a place of treatment. You need to be in a rehab. So step number four, you have to take stock of your life. Step number five, you have to admit your wrongs. Now, I understand when I talk about an integrated approach to treatment. When you talk to some individuals and you ask them the reasons why they don't own it. They don't own it. But you have to admit you're wrong to yourself. You have to admit that you still have the power of choice. Okay, why are you living on your streets? You might be living on the streets because your home is not a loving home. Maybe you have had a stepmom that was not nice to you, like Cinderella's stepmom. But at the end of the day, you still have to admit that you have to own it. You still have to admit to yourself, God, and others that you are the one that made that particular decision. Your stepmom didn't make that decision. Your addiction, you have to admit. Okay, that's number five. Number six, you have to be ready to have God remove your character defects. God has to help to work on your character to change you. Then you also, step number seven, you have to ask God to remove your shortcomings. Now, this is where reflection comes in. You have to write down everyone you have harmed doing your addictions and be ready to make amends. So that's why we go through the step, one step after the other. A part of step number 8, you have to, all the individuals that you've harmed, all the individuals you've stolen from, all the individuals that you've affected during your addiction period, you have to be ready to make amends. And make amends to those you've harmed. Step number 10, you have to continue to look at your actions and admit that you are wrong. In order for you to go through the steps, you cannot blame somebody for decisions that you have made. And so when we talk about overcoming addiction, yes, individuals might have played a role, warlords play a role, poverty play a role, being a dysfunctional family play a role, but you've made decisions in light of that. And so step number 10, you have to continue to look at your actions and admit when you are wrong. Then you have to pray to God for direction and the power to follow those directions. Finally, step number 12, you have to put into practice what you've learned and carry the message of faith and recovery to other addicts. Step number 12, everything you've learned, put it into practice and continue now. Step number 12 is where now having overcome, being sober now, being clear-minded, being clear in one's thinking now you're able to help other individuals who find themselves in this situation. Now, there's something I want to deal with, and I'll ask our tech support to please put up for me the spiritual principles to overcome addiction. The spiritual principles. What are the spiritual principles? The spiritual principles, number one, there has to be conviction. You can get delivered without conviction. You realizing that you admitting to God and even to yourself the way you've been living is not right. So there has to be conviction. Conversion is when you're really fighting to change. You're really fighting to change. And then surrender, confession, restitution. Restitution is when you go to the individuals that you've robbed, you've offended, and you apologize to them because the people know you. They have pictures of you. They've seen how you've terrorized the community. And that is an important step in the healing process. You have to go to family because when you were on drugs, you were stealing everything in your family home. And that's the reason why you've broken every bridge. And so it's important that there has to be conviction, there has to be conversion, surrender, confession, restitution, prayer, quiet time, witnessing, finally, helping one another. These are some of the spiritual principles when we talk about necessary in order for the individual to overcome addiction. Now, let me talk about some of the excuses. You can overcome without excuses. And this is very important that I deal with excuses. Well, if you really serious about overcoming drug abuse, you can't say I didn't cause it, or I can't cure it, I can't control it. No, those are the three can't that you have to avoid. I didn't cause it. But then who caused it? So these are excuses that you shouldn't make just from a treatment perspective, just from a clinical perspective. I didn't cause it. But then who's taking it? Who's putting it in your mouth? So you have to admit, I didn't cause it. You have to admit that, take responsibility for your action and everything, even though there's compulsion, even though there's craving, even though there's been consequences, even though you're out of control. I didn't cause it. That's just an excuse. That's an excuse to say, I didn't do anything. No, you did something. So a part of the healing process is you can't just say, I didn't cause it, or I can't cure it. I can't cure it is a different language. I can't cure it is where you're realizing that, you know what? I can never be drug-free. Yes, there are individuals who were like you, but then what? Today they are free. So the things that you shouldn't be saying, the things you shouldn't be internalizing. I didn't cause it. I can't cure it. I can't control it. These are things and languages you shouldn't be speaking if you're really, really, really serious about overcoming addiction. Now, let me begin to talk about. I told you, like, in the ghetto in Liberia, they call the common drug that the Zogos are using cocaine, because it's a mixture of cocaine and other substances. One of the things I wanted to talk about is, an integrated approach. What do we do when it comes to intervention? Yes, the integrated approach. Thank you so much to our technical support. An integrated approach. Let me tell you something. In order for us to deal with this Zogo crisis, everybody has to play a role. The individuals who have been abusing drugs, they have to play a role. They have to go through the 12 steps. They have to get clean. They have to go to rehab. They have to do detox. However, the families have to play a role. What am I saying? It is very difficult to see your brother, your sister, your son, your grandson in such a situation like this. But you can't give up. God never called us to give up on individuals. The Bible says we ought to be fishers of men. I don't want you to ever give up. And so what am I saying to family members? The individuals who find themselves in this situation, don't give up on them. What can you do? You can pray for them, but you can continue to warn them to get the help, the necessary help that can bring them to freedom. Now, so families have to play a role. Families, don't give up. Don't give up on your family members who are dealing with this kind of situation, who living on the street, who living like a mad person. So family has a role, but then the individuals have a role too. The individuals have to want to be free from drugs. And so the individual has a role, families have a role, but the church also have a role. Now, a lot of these individuals, the church will really, really have to invest in them. Zogo is not an individual that might be able to come to church and contribute to the church. And so, but if we invest in the young people and give them skills and help them through recovery and give them a better education, later on, they will be able to give back to the church. And so initially, they won't be able to give the church tithes and offerings because they don't even have it. The church will have to help them with clothing because some of them don't even have clothing. In fact, if they come to church and folk that's so dignified might not even want them to sit by them. But let me tell you something. What am I saying to churches in Liberia? In order for us to tackle this Zogo crisis, churches in Liberia, we have to think church in a new way. What am I asking you to do? I'm asking you, church, to have a place in the church where you have clothes. And so if a Zogo comes to church, have a shower where that Zogo can take a shower. And when he takes a shower, have a place where we can have like a clothing place where he can get clothing to wear. Then you won't have to worry about his odor. You don't have to worry about him sitting around you since you're so sanctified and so dignified. But what am I asking you to do? Have a shower at the church where individuals coming from the streets can be able to get a shower. I hope we can have at the church places where you can even get them a haircut. I hope you know, if your church has a young man that got to give people a haircut, I hope the church can have a barber there who can just give, a Zogo. He's been growing that hair that he hasn't cut for a while. He just needs a clean haircut. He needs a shave. He hasn't shaved for a long time. He needs a hot shower. He needs a hot meal. He needs some warm clothing and everything. So churches, we have to start to think church in a different way. A church needs to have a place for shower for these young men and young women. And then we have to have a clothing place, a place where they can get a hot meal. And then even when they come into the church, then you won't have this Zogo stigmatization happening in the church because the individual has cleaned up. They won't look like a Zogo. What am I saying to you? Glory be to God. When the prodigal son came home, the father put on him the ring and the father put on him a robe. Why did the father put on him a robe? The father put on him the robe because he wasn't dressed properly to be able to go into the house. And so if we want Zogos to come into the house of God, we have to change what they've been wearing. That means a hot shower, a hot meal, some deodorant, a hygiene products for them to be able to brush their teeth, for them to be able to get some warm clothing and everything. Then we bring them into the church where they can learn the word of God, and then rehab and the road to recovery will be the next step. So the church has a role to play. The church will have to see these young people as a way of investing in them. I like to think some of the people I really know personally who've been really doing a great job with reaching the young people out there. I know Brother Killer Doma, Pastor Killer Doma. He's a fighter. He's out there in the trenches, and he's doing an amazing job. They bring food, they bring medical supplies. His church is in the ghetto, man. And so that's the way we have to go after them, because one soul is important to the Lord. Even when one soul repents, the Bible says heaven rejoice, the angels in heaven rejoice. So churches, you have to have a Zogo program. A youth and so your youth department, we have to structure now youth departments in such a way that it's not just the typical youth department for kids, but because these kids are a population by themselves, and so they need clothing, they need sneakers, they've been living on the streets, so they need shower, they need medical supply, they need hygiene products. And so the church has to have these kind of things in the youth department and everything. They need shelter until we can get them into rehab. And so the church has to be thinking about this thing. But I tell you something, the church will not solve this problem if we solve it by ourselves. We have to come to the table together. We have to be able to work for once. I'm asking, the Bible says, how blessed, how good and blessed it is for brethren to be able to dwell together in unity. And so churches will have to come together. For once, let's not compete against each other. For when fishermen don't fish, they fight. When power that's supposed to be used outside is used inside, the result is explosive. This is not the time for you to be saying my church or my ministry. The crisis is bigger than any church. You're talking about thousands of young people, man. When these young people can pack any church, these young people can pack stadiums. And so what am I saying? Churches, come together. For once, let's work together. Share best practices together. So the church has a role to play. Families have a role to play. The individuals themselves, they have a role to play. You can be doing the blame game and say that the reason you're a Zogo is because of child stealer. You play a part. You play a part. And continuing to use the joke is not child stealer now. You play a part. But guess what? There's hope for you. Now, the general population, what do you do? Yes, you can't say that's just his problem. That's just his problem. No. You're not sleeping at night because the Zogo is coming to steal from your house. So when it's raining, you're not sleeping because the Zogos are terrorizing the neighborhood. It's going to be a better neighborhood if we invest in them. It's going to be a better neighborhood if he gets rehab. It's a better neighborhood if he's involved in getting a trade. It's a better neighborhood if he gets new skills. It's a better neighborhood if he gets a better education. And so investing, you can say that's his problem. I'm telling you something. In Genesis chapter 4, God told us that we ought to be our brother's keeper. You can't ignore this stuff here. You cannot ignore it. We all got to get involved in this. And whatever way you can do it, if you can go out in the streets, like how some churches are doing, then you can contribute to those who are doing it. And then churches can share best practices. And so church has a part to play. Government has a part to play. If you look at the national budget, how much of the national budget has been set aside for the current Zogo problem in the country? How many rehabs do we have? And so when these kids go to the hospital, do we have hospitals that are making the crisis a priority, or the hospital already dealing with so many other cases, they don't even have time to prioritize and what we call in counseling triage these kind of cases? So what am I saying? There has to be an investment on the part of the government to invest in these kind of infrastructures and all. And this is part of infrastructure development. And so even political candidates who thinking about leading the country, grassroots leaders who thinking about leading the country, we have to put this on the platform. We have to put a little bit more in the budget towards this problem. And so in terms of policing, the police have a role to play in it. If you pay the police better, then would they get tempted? That's something for us to think about. But the police have a role to play in it. That the police are not involved in the situation and everything. We will hope that they're not involved in the situation, but that they would help in this kind of situation, because to stop from drug dealers from destroying the lives of precious young people in the country. Now, border control. The border control people will have to stop people from just bringing it into the country easily. Those who are doing the selling. And so there has to be proper policing and everything, so drugs is not so accessible. You have to police the country in such a way that is difficult for the drugs. You have to pay police a better salary. If you have to create a special unit that just deals with it, then we have to put the money where we need to put the money if we're concerned about these precious lives. And so what am I saying? I'm saying that individuals have to play a role themselves in their own healing process. Churches, pastors, community leaders have to play a role. Now, if the doctors and everything, if the doctor specialization is not psych, if the doctor specialization is not chemical dependency, they will have to get training to be able to deal with such a population like this. Churches, for once, we have to come together to be able to work together, because this is a crisis that affects all of us. Investing in the precious life of the young men and young women. Now, let me talk about something. If from the creation of hostels, some of these children be living on the streets. And so if he goes to the rehab, and he gets clean at the rehab and everything. Now, this is the question. Where will he live now? How will he make an honest living? Where will he stay? He needs skills. You have individuals already in the country who graduated from the U.S., from the University of Liberia, that's not a Zogo, that doesn't even have a job. So how about a Zogo who doesn't even have an education? But now, so we have to train these individuals with trade, vocational training, technical training, how to be able to make a living. Now, organizations will really, really have to invest if we really concerned about precious life. Now, like the young girls, if you don't want them to go back into prostitution, what can you do? Are we going to open like a sewing? You can teach them how to sew. But then how would they make money? Will you open like not the sewing school? The sewing school is not enough. After they get the skills from the sewing school, maybe like a sewing warehouse where they can start working there and everything, not just one of them, but maybe a group of them, maybe restaurants. Maybe you can have a lot of these girls, them working in a restaurant, maybe 10 of them in a restaurant, where now they're learning new skills, cooking skills, customer service skills, money management skills, and everything. But we have to be able, if you really want them to not go back, we have to invest in these precious lives. Is it worth it? Yes, it's worth it. Is it a lot of work? Yes, it's a lot of work. But we have to do it. It's going to take an integrated approach. Everybody has to play a part. Individuals in the diaspora have to play a part. Credible people now, credible people, credible organizations that are on the front line. We can help these organizations, help them with clothes, help them with medical supply, help them, with scholarship for these individuals and everything. Credible organization. We're not talking about individuals who are into scamming, who are not ready to fall and everything. And so what we're saying is we really need credible people to take a lead. And this is what leadership looks like in public. Credible individuals to take a lead. The crisis is so important that we don't want individuals in the diaspora sending you money for these precious young lives, and then you're not spending it on these young people. But how would they need hostels? They need housing. They need job training. They need jobs. And so there has to be a major investment in the youth in the country. And God, and the fascinating story is in Ezekiel chapter 37. It's a fascinating story of dry bones. But can the dry bones live? And the Bible says that the dry bones can live again. And so this is hopeful to me. I've treated clients, and now today they're drug free. Can dry bones live again? Yes. And can individuals change? Yes. But it's a lot of work. They need accountability. They need somebody who really cares. They need compassionate ministries. But can dry bones live again? Yes. Dry bones can live again. And so when it comes to drug abuse and the Zogo crisis, is going to take an integrated. The government, I'm asking you to get involved. I'm asking you got to invest in the precious young people. The police, we got to pay the police better salaries so that the police can be able to do policing. Individuals at the border have to be paid well so they can really protect the borders. Whatever laws that need to be put in place to help the situation, then the lawmakers need to make laws so that we don't have a crisis. Churches, for once, we have to work together. We have to come together. We have to, it's not like, for once, I'm asking you to not stay in your lane I'm asking us to all come together, work together. It's a crisis that affects all of us. But if we can pull together our resources, and then a change can become a reality. One of the fascinating stories that have always touched my life and touched my heart was the story of Andrew. In John chapter 1, verse 42, Andrew had given his life to the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. But Andrew is a remarkable story in the Bible. When Andrew came to the Lord, Andrew went and he found his brother and brought his brother to the Lord. And so, what am I saying? I'm saying an operation one, bring one. Operation one, bring one. What am I asking you to do? I'm asking maybe families, one family in America can just say, you know what? We'll just sponsor one Zogo. It can be a boy or it can be a girl. Families in America can say, you know what? I will just sponsor one Zogo. Their rehab, their education. We have to build some hostels for them. Maybe help them in a hostel to help them until that individual gets training. And so that's what the scholarship's going to look like, what the sponsorship's going to look like. One operation, one, bring one. You help one Zogo. Later on, that Zogo will be able to go and bring another person. But they got to want it. They got to mean it. But if we don't do anything, the situation will deteriorate. And we haven't been doing anything. But if what we are doing right now, if we were doing it in an integrated way and trying to tackle the problem, I'd like to thank all the soldiers who've been fighting hard out there, though. People who've been in the trenches, churches who've been praying, families who haven't given up. But what am I asking us to do? I'm saying, look, let's get involved. Folks in the diaspora, let's get involved. These are precious young people. Churches here, let's get involved. People back home, let's get involved. We're saving precious lives. And so that's the integrated approach. The individuals have to want it. We have to want it. They have to want it. We have to want it. The government have to do something about it. Churches have to do, hospitals have to do something about it. We have to create more hospitals that are just for this kind of a population, everything psych, chemical dependency, detox. Going through withdrawal can be very, very difficult and everything. It's easy for them to want to go back. We have to understand the cycle. We have to understand patterns. We have to understand the fighting temptations that they're going to be dealing with and everything. And so we have to train even social workers and counselors to be able to handle this kind of population and everything. But mental illness is just like any other illness. It can be managed. There's medication, there's therapy. And so now abideth faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these, Apostle Paul says, is love. Don't never give up on these folks. Don't never give up on the situation that is happening. So now abideth faith. But the faith that if we integrate spirituality, our Christian faith, with medical skills and clinical skills, that we can help this population. May God help all of us. Don't say it's just a problem there. No, it's all of us problem. It's all of us problem. Because if you go to Liberia and you're concerned about walking in the street because somebody's going to check your phone or steal your bag or come break the door at night, then it becomes all of us problem. Us getting involved in this problem will help all of us. It will heal the nation and move us to higher heights. May God bless us now. In Jesus' name, amen. This has been Hello Pastor, and the topic today has been drug abuse and the Zogo crisis in Liberia. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Freeman. So this time we're going to transition. We're going to transition into question and answers. We have a lot of questions in the comment section. So we're going to bring the questions on screen and then we'll have you address it. Hopefully, Dennis has some technical difficulties on power outage. So hopefully he will come on before the end. If not, we'll do the Q&A session. And then after that, you will give us your closing remarks and give us some key takeaways. And then we'll wrap it up for the day.
Thank you so much. So you can put the questions up and then I will start to deal with the question. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, what is the role of the church in fighting Zogoism? Okay, number one, the church have to have a special ministry in the church. Every church, I'm saying every church in Liberia needs to have a special department that deals with fighting. Okay, so now, what would they be doing? In that department, you will have food, a food pantry, a food bank, because the children are hungry. Clothes bank. You will train the young people on how to reach that population. All churches have to be trained, have departments. Every church in Liberia needs to have a department that tackles Zogoism. Every church needs to have an outreach to the Zogos. Shower when a Zogo comes to church. If he's smelling, go take a hot shower. Give him some fresh clothes. Have some clean clothes. People here in the diaspora, we can find some used clothing to be able to send over there. We will hope that when we send used clothing from here, that it won't be sold on the market in Liberia. We will hope that it will really, really go. So there can be a partnership between folks in the diaspora here with churches back home. If it's medical supply, if it's hygiene products and everything, but every church needs to have a Zogo department. Hygiene, food products, food on the go. The Zogo can, but if I can give him some crackers and he hasn't eaten so long, then if he eat that, you give him some porridge, some cream of wheat, some oatmeal and everything, some cocodolos and everything. And then he will be hungry when he's listening to the message of the pastor. Give him some clean clothes. Then you won't say he's smelling. The young women there, you got to give them some clothing, women products, when they're going through their time and everything, and help them and everything. So what churches can do, each church in Liberia needs to have a Zogo department in that church. Okay, that was the first question. Let me tackle the second. Yes, yes, crack cocaine is in Liberia. In fact, that's why they call the name of the drug in the ghetto cote, because it's cocaine and other substances mixed. They're mixing all kind of stuff. They're mixing also. We don't just have a cocaine problem here in the US and other parts of the world. You do have crack cocaine problem there. People are bringing it from other countries. And bringing it from other countries into the other, but I think it's being manufactured too in the country. So it would take a serious law enforcement. It would take serious law enforcement if it's being manufactured in Liberia, or if it's not just coming from other countries in the surrounding region. Then it takes law enforcement How is it coming in the country? Who's bringing it in the country? Why is it not being detected? Who's selling it to the young people? Did the police not even see this stuff? So we need law enforcement, but then you got to pay the policeman, because you know, underground drug industry is a multi-million-dollar business, and so you can buy a police. So you got to pay him well. He's got to be committed, patriotic to precious lives. Okay, let me tackle the next question. Yes, mental illness. Yes, yeah, it's. Yes, mental illness is at work too, because you know, when a person abuses drugs over a period of time, it affects the mind. I don't know if you saw the video from the beginning of the show, where there was a mind. So many drugs are mind-bending drugs. They affect your entire life, you know. But when mental illness can be treated, mental illness can be treated. I have clients I've treated before. We can do therapy, we can do medication. Yes. We will have to look for, when we're doing what we call the assessment, when we're doing the assessment or screening the individuals, we have to pay attention to everything. We have to look at you know, psychosocial history. We have to look at mental illness, what that mental illness. So the children of Zogo and the children of Zogo 2, or the Zogo, or if the Zogo was a former combatant and everything, we have to look at all these different things. But any mental health practitioner, when they're doing that screening, initial screening, will look for all these different things. Am I going to be dealing with? Do they have a history of mental illness, and everything? So you can be able to treat that. And then when it comes to creating goals, when these goals are created, then we can be able to treat the individuals based on a proper evaluation. Okay, let me tackle the next one. No, when you initially, when that guy you saw, like in America here, like in America, if a person like that is in America here, what would the cops do? They would take the individual straight to the hospital. Like that young man you saw that was bending, the police will come. There's a special unit in the police that deals with substance abuse. And so what that unit needs to be created in Liberia. We need to create police who kind of have an idea of mental illness. We can train them. We can train the police, because that individual needs to be taken. Right now, that individual cannot make any good decision. I'm even afraid if the car even hit him down, because of the mind-bending drugs that he was on. So that individual needs to be taken straight into a hospital or ER room for detox and everything. After the detox process, then the individual in the withdrawal process, then that individual will come to making good decisions. But initially, the first intervention that needs to be done is to be taken to the hospital, so we can be able to flush some of that stuff from out of the system and everything. At that point, he's not in the right mind. Yes. Well, I don't know who bringing the drugs into the country, but I don't know. I think you said yes. Some people drugs are their business now. I don't know if it's the government that bringing it in. I really don't know who's bringing it in. If that's the government that bringing it in, if it's individuals there that manufacture it in the country, if it's coming from West African country, is it coming from Nigeria? I don't know. I don't know who's bringing the drug into the country. But the one thing I can say is this. Drug is business. It's big business, but it's illegal business. It's dangerous business. But can we fight? Yes, we can do something about it. We can move these precious young people from being customers to being productive citizens. I'm just trying in my deliberation for them to not be a drug customer anymore, but to be a productive citizen, to do something constructive with their life, to have a meaningful existence. So my battle right now is I don't know who bringing the drugs into Liberia. Is it the government? Is it Nigerians? Who bringing it in? Are there other people in the country manufacturing it? How is it getting into the country? Are there meth lab, cocaine lab in the country? Who's cooking all this stuff? I don't know how it's getting there, but whatever way it's getting there, we need law enforcement, government policies to be cracked down on this situation. Let me take the next question.
So due to time, I think we're 12 minutes over 11 minutes. So we'll wrap it up on questions. We'll just let you do your closing and any
Yes,
takeaways, and then we'll call it a day.
yes. Okay, thank you so much. All right, so my major thing is this. This conversation, I consider it a starting conversation. That Hello Pastor just wants to throw light on this. We had Zogos in the Old Testament. The Bible talk about a group of young men. The Bible called them worthless men, called the sons of Belial. The prodigal son is another Zogo. The man who was living in the graveyard in Mark chapter 5 is another Zogo. But I want you to not give up. I've heard testimonies of these young people changing. We're not called to give up on people. Even when you're treating them, don't give up. And so my word I will leave for all of us today is we all have a part to play. Don't just say what happened today is not happening. No, we all our brother's keeper. If you got some clothes that you haven't even used, you got so much clothes, man. Don't give it to the Goodwill store. Let's see if we can find a way to give it to some of these. So somebody has to have an organization, some way we can get clothes, hygiene products, and everything. And I'm so grateful for Pastor Killer Dunbar, who is out there in the streets helping some of these young people. And there are others who are involved in everything, some of the players who are involved in this. And so let's not give up. But let's understand that it's going to take all of us. We have to be the light of the world and salt of the earth. Okay, God bless you all in Jesus' name.